almost everybody with something to prove. I felt on the first day the good communication I wanted to see. And so today, emphasize going to continue with the red zone. We're also going to add some game and clock management things to the end. So you'll see that as we're working through some 2-minute at the end of the half. So that'll be a part of what we do on just about every practice, and we'll start that today. So all that said, let's get it rocking.
Hey, Dan. John Keim, ESPN. What did you see from Jaden yesterday as a continuation of what you saw from the spring and maybe what he did over the 6 weeks that you were gone?
Well, one, I thought he had a really strong day, a lot of completion, good throws. When you get into the red zone, there's kind of two things that can happen. There's a first play and then a second play that can take place. And so seeing the guys get outside the pocket and move a little bit, I thought that was good. All the quarterbacks were able to get outside and get going. So that was a byproduct of having the red zone come in. The communication happens faster, the throws happen faster. So I thought it was a good way to get started.
And how much, you said that you hadn't done the red zone this early before, and that how much of that is helping, I know he's in the competition and all that, but helping a young quarterback kind of get used to that right away because of the situation of football and the importance.
Yep, we had a good discussion about that yesterday, as he's knowing that in pro football some of these windows are tighter, and when can I fit in, when can I? And so having lunch together, we discussed a little bit of that yesterday. And so some of those are just a byproduct. I wasn't thinking of that, in the design of the practice, but when you find out some of those things, that's good. And let's be honest, if we're going to be a good scoring team, we've got to be, excellent down there. And so we're going to spend the extra time with that too.
Ben Standig with The Athletic. Dan, it's insanely early to even think about the 53 too much. But that said, do you enter a training camp sort of in your head like, okay, broadly, this is kind of the guys I'm kind of looking at, or this is the number of positions I want, or do you really wait until the very end to think about that?
I think you're close, Ben, but I'll give you one different approach. What I visited with the staff, I think there's going to be some really close and strong competition. So as you're going through each day as a position coach, finding what somebody's strong at, what they're need more work on. So as you're going through, you're not making a decision 6 weeks from now on what happened in the last preseason game. But now there's a body of work. This is what I've seen. Almost each of these practices is like a performance to say, here's where we're going to go. And when you have, for instance, you and I and John all, vying for maybe the same spot, what are going to be the separators? And so keeping track of that over the course of time helps that. And so I'll choose to use the whole time to gain all the information. And so it may not be the 53 yet, but it's going to be all the things that lead up into that.
And from when you were head coach last time, what positions have evolved where, like, maybe in 2016 you were thinking, hey, we need more tight ends and linebackers in this era, we need more something else. Has that changed at all for you?
One thing that's evolved probably for me is multi-positional players. And there's real value to that, to where, a wideout who can take snaps, a linebacker who can play defensive end, and a safety that can play down to linebacker. So not everyone can do that. But for the people that can, you've added value, and there could be a new look or a new scheme to work. So the multi-positional players, to me, that's been one of the bigger changes. And my time in Dallas allowed me to explore into that area more. And it's led me now to, with our own staff, are we looking for that? Can we find some other roles for people?
Dan, Chick Hernandez, WSA 9. Short practice yesterday for what we saw, right?
Yep.
And then fans are like, wow, that's pretty quick. But I'm out here live at 6 o'clock and you guys are on the field. Can you kind of go through what the schedule is for these guys for an entire day?
Sure. And the fans are right. It will ramp up more, as you go, to where you don't start your first day, at the max, minutes and reps and time. So that's also a build up to make sure the players can sustain as we're going to go. Obviously the morning part, there could be some early lifting to go into practice. Pre and post practice, a lot of individual skill work. And then after practice, some will have a lift or a conditioning. Then we start the afternoon special teams meetings, offensive, defensive meetings to review what happened out at the practice field. Then we transition team meetings with me, and then we start the whole process again. More special teams, offensive meetings to install for the next day. So the afternoon consists of meetings, to install. The PM is jog throughs to get that right, so then we can execute that the next morning. So think of the day shifts in the afternoon into the next day, and it's all a lead up to this morning's practice. And then we'll go review it and then do that process again.
Hey, Coach George Wallace, WTOP. You mentioned the other day of things you were looking for coming back from the break. You want to hear a team before you see it on the field.
That's
Did
correct.
you hear what you wanted yesterday?
I thought it's a good question, George, and I said it to the players yesterday. By the last period, I felt like we did. On the very first one in the red zone, I did not feel the same communication as it started, and then by the next one, it got a little better, and as the practice got towards the end, that's when I felt the most. And so I brought that up to the guys, but I felt it going from a C to a B, as the day went.
Hey, Dan. Zach Peerless, CBS Sports. Terry yesterday talked about it's not so much how much he's saying, but what he's saying that he's focusing on in his leadership. What have you noticed from him, maybe in specific to what his leadership is like in terms of getting his point across and not so much how many words he's saying?
Yeah, I think as you lead, you want to make sure it's authentic to you, Zach. And so Terry's one, he's a pro's pro. He practices like it. He looks like it and conducts himself like it. And so when he steps into the arena to go compete, having, coached against him, like there's no BSing around. Like he's here to do business. And so sometimes that's also leading in a way that I handle my stuff to allow others to be a part of that following. Sometimes it's behind the scenes to help someone get to a new space. Some people are, out in the front to go. So, but by him, he looks like it, walks like it, talks like it. So when he goes into the arena, like he is absolutely committed and ready to go, and that's also leading.
Hey, Dan. Natalie Small, 7 News Sports. When it comes to the offensive line specifically, what are you looking for in these early days in terms of how the guys are gelling and progressing before the pads come on?
Two parts, Natalie. One, first part is where are we on the skill work? To say the individual blocks, the individual techniques. You don't go a whole day of, hey, we're just going to work pass protection or just the run game, because that's not how the game flows. So you're in and out of drills in between practice. So different combinations of players will be necessary over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks to find what's the best winning combinations. And so often a guard or a center has to work together, or a tackle or a guard have to work together. So they'll need time, but we'll mix and match until we find that right balance. So I'm looking for execution and the skill work. That's always something that I think will be leveling up and again and again and again.
Hey, Dan. Scott Abraham, ABC 7. You've had experience with both. So training camp here, team headquarters, versus a training camp maybe away from team headquarters. I believe you experienced that with the Cowboys. What's the benefit to both? And is that something maybe down the road you'd like to implement, a training camp maybe away from Ashburn?
Yeah, potentially probably be a good question for the offseason as we're going through it. But more importantly, how do you connect with an entire group? And that's, to me, where it's going. This is my first experience, with the training camp here, and I'm really pleased, with the setup and how it's going, because sometimes you can't envision it until you're, living in it and all day after day. So I've been really pleased with the format so far.
Hey, Coach. David Harrison, Sports Illustrated. Talking about the versatility of some of the players, Jamin Davis and his cross-training with being a linebacker and an edge rusher. How do you feel like that's going right now? Yeah,
Dave, that's one of the positions that I spoke about, to have multi-position work, and we'll continue to do that with him. He's got speed and length, like an outside backer does. So you need work at it, and it's not something that I'll know in 1 or 2 days. So we'll work all the way through to add another pass rusher to a group. That adds depth, that adds value. So you'll see him some in some third downs and some 2 minutes, working off the edge, just to keep pushing. What else can we do? How else can we feature players? And Jamin's a perfect example of that, Dave.
Nikki Chafalo with the Washington Post. Want to ask you about 2 specific players. John Ridgway, a guy from Dallas.
Yep.
What have you seen from him just in your time here, and what do you need to see from guys like him and Phil Mathis as they kind of work to, find their spot back there?
Yeah, and I think, and you brought up 2 guys that have similar traits with Phil and with John, and so sometimes the big guys inside, they really got to be strong to command 2. So in a run game scheme where, hey, I can get onto the guard and the center staying there to allow linebackers to play quickly. So what I have seen from John, like his technique, the conditioning, all of that is just ramped up for him over the last couple of years. And so we've been watching him from afar, when I was coaching against him. And so to partner back up with him has been good. And I've really been impressed by Phil. He is just somebody that's not going to miss this opportunity. There was, I'm sure you guys saw some of the flight stuff. He was going to have a hard time getting in on time, and he wasn't having it. Got to another city, drove a long way to get here the night before reporting on his own. And I think that shows where he's at in terms of how badly he wants to make his mark and to make his impression. He would have been here on time, would have got here probably 11:30 that morning. He wasn't having it. He wasn't going to leave anything to chance. So I think that probably shows you a glimpse of, where he's at and how important this time is to him.
And then Jaden Daniels, you hear so much about young players, young quarterbacks, and their footwork. With him, has that at all been an issue? Is it something that he's had to work on at all, just coming from the college game?
Yeah, I think the more that you ask quarterbacks, that'll be always something, because so much of their power comes from their legs. So he absolutely has worked really hard on that. And like a lot of quarterbacks, they also, when they're away from here, have some specific things and people that they work with, and Jaden's no different than that. But, he's worked exceptionally hard. You can just see all these leveling up happen with him as well. And that's kind of the fun part about the young rookies, because their ability to ramp up fast and improve, it happens so quickly, and it keeps going and going. And so sometimes there's valleys to go, but in his case, you're just seeing all this momentum build for what he can be.
Sam Fortier with the Washington Post. What will your process be for game management, and who will you be communicating with on the headset?
So for me, I'll be, on the field, obviously, with timeouts, scenarios, situations, and we hired Dave Gardy in the offseason, and so Dave will be in the press box and will assist me into that space. He's got a huge background through officiating and replay and others through the NFL, so that was a heavy hitter for us to be able to add someone like Dave to the staff. So we're very excited to add him.
And how do you put that into practice today?
Every day we'll be doing that. So we show examples that happen in the meeting room. So just like you would install an offensive play or a defense or a special teams play, you do the same thing in game management plays. So Dave has times that he presents to the team. We go through that. We went through some last night, and we'll execute those today. So it's not a lot different than the process of putting an offensive play or a defensive play. All of that has the same traits to it.
We got time for 3 more. Hey, Dan. JP Finley, NBC4, 1067. With Eckler getting here and building that relationship, obviously no pads are on, you haven't done much of the run game stuff, but how is it going in the development with him and Brian Robinson and what could be a fairly dynamic backfield?
Austin, we were talking about Terry earlier, and I think there's a lot of traits that are similar as ball player and as men, because they have such high standards of how they conduct themselves and how important it is and the details that they go to. So for instance, him, splitting out of the backfield and running routes as a receiver and the details that go into that. He's just constantly trying to improve, and I really respect that about him. So guys like he have been excellent additions. We talked about, guys who add value, not just by what they say, but what they do. And Austin certainly fits into that category.
Hey, Dan. Varun Shankar, The Washington Post. What have you seen so far from Mike Sainristil, and how do you see his skill set fitting in your defense?
Yeah, we've seen a lot so far. It's at that position, run fits, blitzing, guarding people, option routes, quick things to go. He's got exceptional quickness. That's what we thought, evaluate him to go. But he's another one that's just really pushing. I think he and Jaden have a lot of similar traits, that they're maybe more mature than the average cat, but have the humility of the young player. So there's a good balance for both of them between confidence and humility, because you need them both to be excellent. And both of them have that, the right balance of both, because if you're too confident and didn't have the right balance of humility, that can, seem as somebody with a strong ego, or vice versa. If you don't have the confidence, that comes across too. And the two of them, they're going to kick ass for a long time together.
Hey, Coach. James Cassata, Wavy TV, over here. What's going on? Given the mix of youth and experience on the defensive line, how crucial is an intense guy like Daryl Tapp?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how many know this, but I also got a chance to coach Daryl years back. And so, man, have I been impressed by what I've seen. Obviously, I've had my eye onto him and, knowing that his time was coming where he was ready to lead. The energy, the instincts, the way to train people. It was so nice to see him and Johnny working some together yesterday because that was their first time on the field together. And the two of them are more similar than they're not. In terms of intensity and the way they want to go about things. So it'll be great to see that relationship grow strong as well.
Hi, Coach. Donna Hopkins, Pro Football Plus. Could you talk a little bit more on Jamin Davis going into his fourth year? What are you seeing for him as he navigates through this fourth year? What is really standing out about him that his development right now?
Well, coming into it, Donna, I wanted to find out what were all the unique things that he could. So in the spring, all right, I want to see him guard a tight end. Now I want to see him guard a back. And then now let me see as the pass rush goes, how do you utilize this size and length that he has? And so part of that, experiment to see, let me see more rush. What about from the end of the line versus blitzing from off the ball? Those were the traits that I was looking at. And what's nice is having a guy like Ryan Kerrigan here that can work very specifically on the skills that we're going to ask Jamin to do. So you'll see him before and after practice. So sometimes you're going to see small moments like in micro teaching sessions for 5 or 10 minutes a day with somebody that over time, Donna, can add up. When you keep doing that over and over, your skills are going to continue to increase. And so Ryan and Jamin are closely connected because when you have to play more than one position, there's a burden that comes with the player. And so that was probably the more difficult part of how to train somebody that plays two positions rather than identifying that. In basketball, how do you have a 5 that can carry, handle the ball? You don't just put them into the same drill. And so how do you work that and discuss those? So Ryan has been integral part of Jamin's development as an end-of-the-line rusher because when you keep experimenting and moving around, that's where you find out. All right, you guys have a good one.